Alright, we've all heard of that cancerous extra credits video that just came out, right? Evil races are bad game design? You know, with bangers like this?
Much of the recent conversation on orcs points out that characterizing a whole species in your game as ugly, warlike, and malevolent might be harmful to real-world groups regularly mischaracterized as ugly, warlike, and malevolent.
Yeah, back when I played Warcraft, I didn't really look at this and think it was this. Even when they introduced brown orcs, I still didn't really get the feeling that there was some kind of hidden racist author whispering in my ear, hey, this is actually about black people. Some people did though, like this person. Non-binary, 22, guitarist, gamer, and leftist. Anti-fascism is self-defense. Orcs are clearly supposed to be black people, even though they're a fantasy race from a fictional world. It would seem that it takes a specific personality type, maybe even a specific type of politics, to view orcs as black people. And for the rest of us, maybe we just accept that it's a fantasy setting because we don't have our heads so far up our own asses that we're tongue-fucking our lunch. But this discourse isn't new. Like a year ago, Sophia Narwitz got dogpiled for saying that gatekeeping your hobbies from leftist corruption is a good thing, after a crowd of concave brains started complaining about the skin color of orcs and dark elves and shit. It's okay, dude, it's a fantasy setting, you'll survive. Guess what? In Sargon's Crusaders campaign, it was Arab-looking people who made up the bulk of the medieval feudalistic society, while the redheads and gingers were uncontacted tribesmen a continent away, and that's okay. I didn't get offended by it and have a massive breakdown just because I shared my skin color with them. And that's the core of this discussion. Not every idea needs to be autistically pushed to its natural end result. Not every stone needs to be overturned. Sometimes you can just compromise. Sometimes you can just let things be. Let me show you what I mean. Rule 0, the idea that the GM can bend the rules in the name of fun, is toxic. Play by the word of God only. Everything must be strictly regimented and codified, sanitized and scientific, and that includes your game nights. The rulebook is law. Hot take. Rolling for stats is neutral at best and toxic at worst. Randomness is not fair, unfairness is not equal. Fun is secondary to equality. How tabletop RPGs are being reclaimed from bigots and jerks. Cthulhu, the horror game where you slowly go insane from encountering the Elder Gods? Well, that's ableist. So now it's a generic time-traveling action romp. Vampire the Masquerade, the game where you literally play the villain, the unholy cursed living dead? Well, that's fascist. So now every character is woke as fuck. Dungeons and Dragons, claiming that races have an evil alignment, or an evil nature, or hell, a nature at all? Well, of course. That's racist. The people who complain about any of this are missing the point. A game is where you do things that you wouldn't do in real life. It's where you step into the role of somebody you specifically aren't, and explore those ideas. I have never been an obese jolly monk, or a lolly vampire soldier, or a homeless half-elf wildling, just like I've never been the hero of time or the vault dweller. Part of playing any game is putting yourself into situations you would never actually get into otherwise. I did a video about this last year, where leftists got ass mad that Arch, Sargon V, Uzulu, Rags, and I played a game of Vampire the Masquerade, where we basically abandoned most of the VTM lore and just adapted the game's systems to play as secret Nazi vampire super soldiers. That was the game where I was the lolly, by the way. Those complaining busybody leftists missed the point, obviously, because we were playing a villainous campaign. You'd think the whole vampire thing would get that across, but that was offensive to these people, and surely was a sign that we were hidden fascists ourselves in real life. Of course, if we were to play as a secret communist vampire super soldiers, nobody would be saying that we were hidden socialists or something like that. Nor would any of us be called secret Nazis if we played as a Nazi soldier during a World War II shooter. We're talking about people who have never even heard of Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS, or watched Hellsing, with their over-the-top, extremely evil and yet simultaneously absurd portrayal of Nazis. And yes, Hellsing fans, when your neo-Nazi consists of a Hitler Youth catboy, there is some absurdity there. The point I'm making is that you do not play Nazis in the game because you are one, but rather because you are not one. That's the point of exploring this kind of evil. Most of these leftists who complained, SJWs, socialists, whatever you want to call them, if they were in Germany during the Second World War, they would be Auschwitz camp guards, and they would enjoy it. It's not about the political difference, not really. It's about their psychology, their personality. They are a pathology looking for a cause. And the original creators of Vampire the Masquerade knew this. In VTM's first edition, the disclaimer in the book says, "The themes and issues described in this game may be disturbing to some and distasteful to others. Though our purpose is not to offend, our use of the vampire as a metaphor and as a channel for storytelling may be misconstrued. To be clear, vampires are not real. The extent to which they can be said to exist is revealed only in what they can teach us of the human condition and of the fragility of the splendor which we call life." A completely reasonable statement. There's edgy shit in the game, some of you may not like it, don't play it if you're squeamish. There is evil here not because we're evil, but because we are exploring evil, so that we may be good. To contrast, the newest edition of VTM contains several pages about how fascists, aka people who object to minorities punching up, yes, it really says that, are not allowed to play the game, and that the game is about monsters, don't be a monster yourself, as if that even has to be said. The same thing happened with Warhammer, when Arch was getting cancelled over some obvious nonsense last year. The statement from Warhammer is that Warhammer is for everyone, and that our fantasy settings are grim and dark, but that is not a reflection of who we are or how we feel the real world should be. Like people actually believed these guys wanted to implement the Imperium of Man IRL. Like people actually thought White Wolf wanted to create vampires who would run the entirety of society from behind the scenes. Why does this nonsense even need to be said? I'm not actually off on a tangent right now, though maybe it sounds like I am. And the reason is, I think I actually have an answer to that question. Why does this even need to be said? And it ties all the way back to that dumb video from Extra Credits. If you've been watching me for a while, you know that I took a lot of lefty classes in university. In one of these classes, the topic of the day was the culture of play, and we had to read these essays. Look at the names of this garbage. Barbie in Black and White, Making Sense of the Modern Toy Box. It was honestly all just intersectional junk, and I really regret wasting the time and money that I spent on it. And hey, if you don't mind helping me recoup it, you can always hit up my subscribe star. And just for you, because I like you a lot, I reread these articles before recording this video, and I am happy to report that just as I remembered them, they contain absolutely nothing of value. But from that entire lesson, there is one kernel of truth that I think is worth discussing. And it is that play is subversive. And of course it is. Play is where the rules get loosened a bit. It's where you can push the boundaries with minimal harm. It's where you can compete at something that is low stakes. It's where you explore and go on adventures. Playing is like dreaming, in that it's a realm where wacky things can happen, and you can test your reactions to them. It's where new ideas appear. It's the boundary between the physical and the psychological. It makes a lot of sense to me that the play impulse shares a heavy overlap with the sexual impulse. The action of play overrides the intention of the toy, in some sense. The professor of the class, while going over that ridiculous Barbie essay, pointed out that despite the unrealistic beauty standards of the Barbie doll, the gender roles it impressed upon the young girls playing with them, and other such tabula rasa nonsense, a lot of little girls play with Barbies incorrectly. That is, they don't only play house with them or whatever, they'll pop their arms off in a pretend gruesome car accident. They'll cut their hair into weird styles. They'll throw them around the room. They'll make them say stuff completely out of character for the approved Barbie personality. And that is because play is subversive. If your culture hands a child a toy that is designed to teach them specific lessons about how to be an adult, there's a high chance that if left to their own devices, the child will make up their own rules instead. I think this is why we have so much nostalgia for an era where we were left alone to play video games, where the games lacked a political message, and there was no reason to think about anything other than going on an adventure. We weren't being told what to think beyond the basic world building of the game and the role we were asked to inhabit. It's not sexist that Mario saves the princess, it simply is. And we know this to be the case because when we turned on Metroid, nobody actually thought, why am I playing the role of the kidnappee? When I took that class and read those essays and listened to that professor blather on, it was in an era where video games were still largely devoid of SJWs. Yes, I'm that old. And the class, the essays, and the lecture revolved around how play was subversive. And the implication was that play was the tool we would use to subvert the cultural hegemony. It didn't matter if the makers of the Barbie dolls and the dump truck toys intended to teach children strict gender roles, because we played with them our way, not theirs. We would take away our values, not theirs. And then, when we entered the workforce, we would implement our values, not theirs. And now that my classmates have done the subverting, they've seized power in entertainment, in games and movies, they understand full well that play is subversive, that their hard work can be undone by their own customers refusing to play by their rules. So, of course, You're not welcome to play Warhammer or Vampire or Cthulhu or D&D if you don't have the correct thinking. Of course, the games need to be changed to add player consent forms, and wheelchair-accessible dungeons, and altering how race works as a mechanic, and adding heavy-handed disclaimers about how awful and culturally insensitive their old content used to be. In order to prevent the subversion of play, the subverters are doing everything short of telling people that you are just no longer allowed to play the old versions of their games. And some of them are even starting to do that too, looking at you, Blizzard. The extra credits video has this to say about biological essentialism.
This idea that a certain subgroup, like race, nationality, or sex, has inalienable traits is called biological essentialism or simply bioessentialism. And it's a valid way to talk about qualities like how many legs an animal has or whether it can fly. But all too often, this concept gets misused in untrue statements, like pit bulls are a violent breed, men are more logical than women, or Asians are better at math. Now chances are, if a game is set in the real world, that the designers are avoiding these tropes because they aren't real, as multiple fields of societal and hard science can readily prove to you. But speculative fiction offers us an opportunity to reify or make real various things which don't exist, or to exaggerate things which do.
Basically, if a character is intelligent enough to be considered a person with rights and responsibilities within their society, then they are somehow magically unshackled from their biology. The leftist position is that the physical differences between the races should no longer matter, even if those differences created wildly different brains, because it's ultimately the collectivist position that the will is separate from the body, not strictly leftist. For example, religious people on the right often say that the soul is separate from the body. Meanwhile, people on the left often pretend that they're purely rational and that their emotions never get the better of them or ever influence their decision-making. Both of these positions, even though they are politically at odds with one another, appeal to the same flaw. The idea that your brain is hardware and your personality or your soul or your consciousness or your will or whatever is software running on the hardware. But we know that to be incorrect. Your will is not separate from your body. You are your brain. And as a quick side note, research into artificial intelligence has hit such insurmountable roadblocks because we are rapidly discovering that an intelligence without a body is almost non-functional. There has to be some sense of self. There has to be some way to identify what is you and what is not you. And significant advancements in creating an actual generalized AI is only starting to come about because we have made robot bodies rather than simply programming them on computers. Extra Credits even refers to Mass Effect in his video, a setting where it makes even less sense to talk about biological essentialism than in D&D, because the various alien races within the Mass Effect universe are biologically distinct to the point that, with a few specific exceptions, there is no Star Trek-style procreation between them. There's no way that their brains function the same way to the point that their natures, biological urges, thought processes, and so on are equalized for the sake of surface-level political correctness. Speaking of Star Trek, that's literally how it works over there. Almost all of the aliens in Star Trek are just humans wearing different hats. The Klingons and Vulcans might be physically stronger, the Paklids seem to be naturally stupid, but beyond that, every other difference is surface level. It doesn't matter that Ferengi have erogenous zones on their ears, because what really makes the Ferengi distinct in the show is their corporatism. And through the show, we see that's entirely culturally constructed. Nearly every Cardassian that we meet is a legitimate state-worshipping fascist, but the show points out that that too is culturally constructed. With just a few exceptions, the differences in race are cultural, and it would make little sense to appeal to biology if you were playing a game set in Star Trek's universe. In Mass Effect, it's the complete opposite. The biological differences are so vast that the species, in fact, matter quite a bit. You cannot make a Quarian survive without their biosuit solely through cultural change. In other words, this is a lefty complaining about biological essentialism in an area where it actually really makes sense to be biologically essentialist, way more so than it does with real-life races of humans. And to your average everyday normie, it looks like they're doing it for woke points. In fact, they probably think they're doing it for woke points. I doubt they've read Barbie in black and white. But the philosophy that drives this sort of stuff is ultimately a kind of cultural conformity. Think of it like this. When you go to a scary movie, you're going there to be scared. You're going so that you may immerse yourself in a reality that doesn't actually exist for you in that time and that place, so that you may feel being scared without actually being in the situation personally. Your politics don't matter. What's going on outside of the movie doesn't matter. And the one thing that would take you out of it more than anything else would be a constant glaring reminder in the corner of the screen saying this is not real. That is the practical end result of the everything is political style of storytelling. If the creator's politics are so immensely important, and socialists and SJWs surely do believe that they are. Why would they ever give you a way to escape them in their escapism? Why would they allow the subversion of play to give you an opportunity to unwind, to detox, to be exposed to an alternative narrative? Why wouldn't they want every single bit of entertainment to be twisted towards their position so that there's no rest from the propaganda? Why wouldn't every video game, tabletop game, movie, TV show feature only the proper politics? And if for some reason it could not, instead feature giant red flashing warning signs that scream, "This is bad, don't be problematic," over and over? Why would the world of pretend be a refuge from the real world? With this in mind, you can now understand their moves. In this type of environment, of course they would say, Warhammer is for everyone, or tabletop is for everyone, video games are for everyone, etc., etc., so that as many people as possible absorb their pre-approved politics. In a free liberal society, Warhammer would not actually be for everyone, sorry to say. Instead, Warhammer would be for anyone, not everyone. It would be for people who like Warhammer, or might like Warhammer, and there's no reason for Warhammer to pander to people who don't like it, unless, of course, the end goal is not the game, but the politics. These people already know how subversive play is. They know how it can change minds and destroy cultures, which is why they will only let you play by their rules. Extra credits is just the next useless idiot in a very, very long line of useless idiots, who thinks that they're saying something smart and progressive, but are ultimately just another part of the problem. I wouldn't worry too much about it though. They're lefty YouTubers after all. I'd wager that the inevitable allegations against them will probably roll in the next few years, and then they'll just be cancelled by the very same culture that they helped to create. Thank you for watching, my friends. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to share it around and do all of the other algorithm positive stuff that the YouTube engagement metrics like. I don't know. Sub for more, or hit up my Patreon or Subscribe Star if you want to keep it coming. And be sure to stick around, because I'm putting up a new video every single day. So, I'll see you tomorrow. I love you.